So, with Mario and Luigi Brothership hitting shelves, it's time to dive in and find out about the new development team now that Alpha Dream are gone. What happened to the Alpha Dream employees who worked on the past Mario and Luigi titles? How many Alpha Dream veterans are still working on Brothership? Who are the developers Acquire? And what is Nintendo EPD's involvement? Firstly, we have the return of Shunsuke Kobayashi, the director of Bowser's Inside Story and Bowser Jr.'s Journey on 3DS, who had previously worked for ILCA, although he returns here not as the director, but rather as the lead game designer under Haruyuki Ohashi of Acquire. This is Ohashi-san's second directing credit, as far as I can tell, after Aegis of Earth, Proto-Novus Assault, but he has also been credited with special thanks on numerous titles, including on both Octopath Travelers. We also see the return of the world designer Akiko Sugimoto, who also returns as one of the game designers after working on multiple previous titles in this series. When I investigated this summer, I couldn't find any up-to-date credits for Sugimoto-san, and I guess I know why. We also have a 3D modeler, Koto Ida, returning, as well, perhaps most significantly, as Yoshihiko Maekawa, who was one of the directors of Super Mario RPG back in the day, has produced all the Mario and Luigi games, and Alpha Dream's final contribution to gaming, Mario and Sonic at the Olympics 2020. He received a special thank for a Mistwalker-developed title called Fantasian, and was credited as being on the original development staff for Live Alive, but is credited with the Acquire credits for now, although as a producer. From Nintendo's end, Toyokazu Nanaka is the producer, continuing from previous games, although Nanaka-san has also project managed Super Mario Party Jamboree, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Endless Ocean Luminous, Princess Peach Showtime, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and another Code Recollection just this year, so it seems like his involvement must have been fairly hands-off. Another Nintendo coordinator, Yoshinori Tsuchiyama, was given a special thanks, but it seems that he was more intimately involved in this year's Princess Peach Showtime, where he was a supervisor. And that's it from Alpha Dream. Some of these people are also involved in Paper Jam, but of the several hundred people credited on Mario and Luigi Brothership, more than 3 times any prior game, they are almost all new to the franchise, and they all appear to be under the direction, not particularly of Nintendo EPD, but of Acquire. It's difficult to tell for sure, but it does seem that there are some people with credits on other Nintendo games developed in-house, suggesting that they are from Nintendo EPD. Some of these credits include Hiroku Gonji, who worked on Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, Issei Nishimura of Yoshi's Crafted World, and Emika Yamamoto from Clubhouse Games. The fact that all these titles were released in 2019 to 2020 suggests that the development of Brothership began after this, and since Alpha Dream bit the dust in October 2019, we can probably assume that they did not have the capacity to scale up production to the degree a project like Brothership would require, and so production was transferred to a new group in the months soon after. I had identified in June that around a dozen Alpha Dream staff went to ILCA and others had done work for Square, Goodfeel and other companies. But it really seems like, with the exception of 4 Alpha Dream employees and 2 Nintendo EPD mainstays, this was a completely rebooted team, and that while Nintendo EPD were heavily guiding procedures, the director and many of the senior producers were from the new development partner, Acquire. So, that leads us to the question, who are Acquire? The company was founded in 1994 and has been making games chiefly for Sony since 1998, although in recent years it has moved heavily into developing for the Nintendo Switch. They co-developed with Square Enix Business Division 11, the timed exclusive for Switch, Octopath Traveler, and worked on that game's sequel as well. They have also had several credits for smaller games this year. What's interesting is that Acquire seems to specialise in motion capture as well as CG and game development, and so it seemed likely that they were approached by Nintendo for their capacity to provide expressive animation. at the current time they report having 148 employees. Takuma Endo, the president and CEO of Acquire, is interviewed on their website in connection with the development team. Google Translate has him saying on Future Games, "While retaining the sharp part of fun that we have always been aiming for, we would like to focus not only on being pointed, but also on areas that are easy to accept by a wide user base. In a specific genre, we will continue to take on new challenges to action games, adventure games, and JRPGs with a high degree of freedom." Now, while some of Nintendo's partners do chop and change between different projects, Goodfeel has worked on Kirby, Yoshi, and Princess Peach in the last decade and a bit, and Next Level Games were fairly prolific back in the day, one has to assume at this point that Acquire will continue to take on future Mario and Luigi games as long as this current title shows sufficient sales promise for Nintendo. But there's always the possibility, given their rather diverse portfolio of titles, that if they have earned Nintendo's trust, they might be approached again for a different genre. Personally, I would love to see someone bring back Wario Land after all this time, and perhaps a team with a great facility with animation could really do an excellent job. As for Nintendo EPD, while they obviously have a large number of people to lend support to their different development associates, and I have seen it asserted that this is a co-development with them, I'm not entirely sure where that assertion is coming from. It seems that Acquire had a very strong steer on this one, and honestly at this point in the Switch's life cycle, it would be surprising if Nintendo's core teams weren't focusing primarily on their next generation of evergreen titles for the Switch successor. There is precedent of secondary teams helping out massively without taking the full lead. Look at Eighting's heavy involvement with Pikmin 4, but I just don't think that's the case here. Okay, before we wrap up, it just remains for me to review my previous forecasts linked to Mario and Luigi, and it's kind of mixed results. As always, I made several different calls, and the headline one, the game developer, was clearly off. At that point, I put ILCA as the highest shout with 50%, and that was obviously incorrect. Although the logic that the game would need a large studio was right, I just hadn't counted on a different studio with a far smaller number of Alpha Dream veterans taking the charge, and in retrospect, 10% to cover all those possibilities apart from the known names was way too low, given that I hadn't been able to account for the whereabouts of about a third of the Alpha Dream veterans from multiple previous Mario and Luigi titles. I do think overall that ILCA was a solid forecast, even though it was wrong, but I think I overestimated the likelihoods of other alternatives such as Camelot, quite notably. On the other hand, I was right to give a 70% likelihood that Shunsuke Koyabashi was likely to be involved. I did start my investigation with him, and I said that while he was at ILCA, it wasn't clear if he was freelancing or there permanently, and as it turns out, not. I was also right to say with 90% confidence that 5 of the people from the list of past developers would be on the list of the new developers, although I was wrong to say 70% that 10 would be. This game is a very significant break with the prior titles team, and while the presence of so many ex-Alpha Dream staff in one place made me sense that not all of them were scattered to the wind, that didn't negate the fact that most of them were, as initially suspected, scattered to the wind. So, a mixed bag, but of course my aim isn't to get every forecast, but in the aggregate and over the long term, be 10% accurate for the 10% calls, 90% accurate for the 90% calls, and so on. All that said, thank you so much for watching. Please do like, subscribe, share, comment, and check out the Patreon for lots of exclusives and other goodies, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.